Welcome back to Bills and Business. I'm your host, Laura Carr, co-founder of USLege, where we make government more efficient with technology. And today I'm bringing you something a little different. We went live from the Texas Venture Forum in Austin, hosted by the Texas Venture Alliance. And it was more than just a gathering. It was a full-on collision of ideas, industries, influence. During the event, we sat down with 7 bold voices who are actively shaping the future of innovation, policy, and capital, not just in Texas, but across the country. In this episode, you'll hear from Rodney Davis, the head of government affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Ted Townsend, president and CEO of the Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce, Marco Cervantes, founder and CEO of Q Branch, Danny Seiden, president and CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, Jessika Calder, policy intern at the Texas AI Association, William Steele, the CEO and co-founder of SupplyPay, and Mark Crumblish, the co-founder and CEO of Eagle Venture Lab. From national security to AI to capital, we're going to be talking about it all, and I hope you enjoy this really fun episode.
Yeah, Danny, thanks for coming and chatting today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you mind telling me a little bit more about you and how you made your way to the chamber?
Sure. So, this is my 4th year running the state chamber in Arizona, and I got there in a very kind of fun way because if you go back, it's very incestuous. If you go back when Glenn Hammer first became president and CEO of the Arizona Chamber, which now is about 18 years ago, my then wife was his first vice president of communications. So she worked at the chamber then. I was in law school. I graduated, when I graduated law school, I actually went to a law firm that represented the chamber. So then you could argue I was also Glenn's attorney. So there was all these connections back and forth to the chamber. But, I have a very long career that always dabbled in both the complete private sector and a lot of government as well, because I love solving problems, and government, is a big problem. Sometimes it needs to be solved, and a big tool. It could either be a weapon or a tool, you could argue. But yeah, so I've been in and out. So yeah, going way back when, I have worked in multiple state legislatures. I have spent some time in DC and really settled in Arizona, never thinking I would be there for very long because I was engaged to my now wife. She was from Arizona. We met in DC. She was an intern at the NRCC when I was working there. And so I go into law school. I'm just going to be a lawyer, done with politics, really kind of burnt out. And it just, doesn't work out that way. I go to a law firm. They see my background, see that I work for state legislatures. They're like, hey, we do some lobbying. We represent big Arizona companies like Freeport-McMoRan, our largest copper producer, responsible for nearly 60% of the U.S. copper that comes out. And so started doing a lot of environmental lobbying, a lot of permitting, air permits, things like that, administrative law, and just kind of got sucked right back into it. Spent time at the legislature in Arizona. Before long, getting called back to do campaign work. And, at my law firm, the general counsel for what was Cold Stone Creamery, at the time, this great ice cream company, she left my law firm to go be the general counsel. And I had a very nice meeting with their then CEO, a guy named Doug Ducey, who was kind of like the co-founder and CEO. And he loved politics. He had this huge sense of civic responsibility, and he wanted to get back into it. And so we used to have these fun conversations about what he could do, what would be a good entrance point for him. And then, one thing leads to another. And we kind of laid out a plan of how one day he could be governor. And I have to tell you, he's one of the most disciplined people I've ever worked with. He met the plan. He fought tax increases when he was state treasurer, all with the goal of one day being governor because he's an executive and wanted to be chief executive of the state. And so, yeah, I worked for Governor Ducey. I was his initial campaign manager. Then I was his deputy chief of staff. I ran all ledge affairs, ran all federal issues, worked on economic development. So our economic development authority reported up to me. And so, did all of that. So it made sense one day, years later, when Glenn leaves the Arizona Chamber, I get a call from the search committee asking me if I'm interested in the job. So.
Wow. Well, you have a very cool, extensive background. I've been actually very excited to meet you because you're Glenn's successor, and I know Glenn very well. Yeah. So very
he's a tough act to follow. Glenn did amazing things. When he took over the state chamber, it was in the red. I mean, Glenn saved the state chamber. He is a big vision guy. He's a big idea person. And so he helped grow the chamber back into being a major political force. And, I've been able to build on that. But a lot of that blueprint came from Glenn.
And your Arizona Chamber of Business News is tremendous.
And that's a Glenn vision and idea. We're having such a hard time getting our media to cover business news and really just basic good stories about what's happening in the Arizona economy. So Glenn uses his foundation, creates Arizona, the chamber business, CBN as we call it now, as a digital network, builds up a following, and they're still going today. We write about 3 or 4 stories a week. We publish columns. We have elected officials who publish columns in it. We do some digital work with it now. I think the sky's the limit. Other chambers have copied Glenn on that. Kentucky has a very good one. Kansas is doing one. So I think Glenn really set a standard with that.
That's very cool. Yeah, when he first told me about that, his vision. So I don't know if you know this. We do the TexasBusiness News with the Texas Association.
He's been telling me about this, and we're interested. I think our CBN folks are like, we want to hear about how this works.
We should chat a little more offline, yes, on some of that. But it's been a really great partnership, absolutely, with that. So
very nice.
So tell me more about the other states that you have worked in and at the state level.
Yeah, no. So I'm from Florida, so it kind of all starts in Florida, and doing student government. I went to Florida State University for my first year, was actively, involved. At the time, they had a Hall of Fame governor, Governor Jeb Bush. So, getting to intern in and around what Governor Bush was doing in Florida in terms of educational freedom, educational choice. He was building the Florida enterprise model, a good public-private partnership for the economy. That's where I learned a lot. The Florida legislature is its own unique animal, as they all are. We were talking about this earlier. You work for one legislature, you've worked for one legislature. So from Florida, I ended up in California, went to Pepperdine, and postgraduate was offered a fellowship, this great fellows program where you work for the legislature and you get a master's degree. And at the time, a new leader emerged in the California Republican Party named Kevin McCarthy, who was the minority leader. So I got to be a fellow underneath then Assemblyman Kevin McCarthy, who was a great caucus politician and very ambitious and a lot of goal setting. So that was exciting times. Arnold had just won governor. So we were arguing it was a mini Republican resurgence, but it quickly died out in California. You couldn't overcome bad policy. Sure. And then, there's Texas, which is kind of like this little off ramp. I was going to go to law school at SMU, but wanted to kind of like get a feel for what Texas was like. And my wife had gone to Baylor. She had some connections here. So I moved to Dallas. I went to go work for a gentleman named Dan Branch, who was in the Texas House of Representatives, and worked on his campaign. It was during redistricting, so this would have been like 2004. And he was, drawn in a new district against a gentleman named Martin Frost. And so it was a fun little campaign. And I got to come down to Austin and do some ledge work for him. He's very focused on property tax, on Robinhood, how Texas funds its public schools. So I learned a lot of public education then. And that was the moment where I was like, I'm done with politics. I'm just going to go to law school. My then fiance wanted to come home, so we went to Arizona. I thought I would just be there for a little bit. And now the Arizona legislature, having worked in the legislature for the governor and now as the leader of the state's largest business association.
Wow. And so as far as kind of what you're doing at the Arizona Chamber, what would you say is your biggest win from the session?
You heard me talk a little bit about it on stage a while ago. We have been witnessing across the country, but in Arizona in particular, the business community used to kind of like have a really good home in, say, the traditional Republican Party. Republicans were known as pro-business, Democrats not so much. That's not the case anymore. That's why we're fiercely nonpartisan these days. We have to build a new coalition that supports job creators wherever we can find them. And it's really issue by issue. But what we've seen in Arizona, we're a high growth state, is this kind of rise of anti-growth on both sides. On the far left side, they don't want big business coming into the state. And on the far right, they're like, we don't want our state's, demographics changing. We don't want them bringing in California. Arizona is one of the leaders in net migration. More people are moving in than are moving out. We're winning that battle by far. And a lot of them come from California because of the harsh economic conditions they're leaving. And they're afraid they're going to change the politics of the state. So we have this anti-growth movement. So this session, we had this great company. It's called Axon. Most people notice Taser. They make tasers. They make body cams, all the body cams. Just watch any cop show, real or fictional, and you'll see Axon writing in the little corner. So great universal brand made right here in Arizona. They're headquartered there, and they wanted to expand their global headquarters. It's Rick Smith. He's a great president, great visionary leader. He has a vision for what he wanted it to look like. Went through city council, passed. They put $70 million in. They were already building it. And then a new council comes in, and they refer it because the unions didn't get an advanced PLA from Rick, and the neighbors started complaining about apartments because he wanted to build a campus. And so we had to fight to survive the referendum and then change the law at the state level to say that if you're building a global headquarters in a city of a certain size, that's not subject to being referred by zoning. And so we were successful.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That was a big win for us.
Absolutely. And how long have you been at the chamber now?
This is my 4th year.
How has it changed? You said that Arizona was in the red when you came in, or when Glenn came in. started improving, of course, but how have you improved it since?
Oh my gosh.
reign?
I mean, again, it's always easier to make something better than to do a complete turnaround or start from scratch. So I've been really focused on best practices and sustainability. Glenn was such a big idea person, and we had all these big, huge fights that happened. There was a move on our ballot. We have in Arizona a very progressive ballot. Anything can make it to the ballot, more or less. It's a signature requirement, and that's it. Then you're on. And we had teachers union put a massive income tax increase on our ballot, raising it to 8.5%, and
Wow.
it would have put us in the top 10 in the country. And the chamber led the fight against it. And so Glenn was always really good at taking on these big, huge fights. Now, what I want to do is make sure everything survives the big issues and the peaks and the valleys. So we've been instituting a lot of best practices. A lot of our growth is sustainable. A lot of our membership interactions are different now. Again, it's just incorporating best practices from around the country. How do we measure ROI? I do quarterly reports. It's a very business-minded approach I bring to them. And we've added, Glenn had a lot of lobbyists come in and join the board, and that's great. It's good to have, they're the operators, they know how things work, but we need more C-suite people. So we've kind of changed our percentages. Right now the chair of my board is the president and CEO of Arizona Public Service, our state's largest utility. And so it's a huge deal to have a CEO like that running our board right now. And we're just focused on that, best practices, growth. Really, I've really moved us so much more into economic development as well. We have a policy agreement. We do a lot of work with our state's Commerce Authority. We represent them. I'll be at the Paris Air Show. We go on international trade shows with them. We present the policy environment for Arizona. You heard a little bit on stage. So I'll go and I'll present to foreign companies looking to make a direct investment. And occasionally they'll say, well, what about, we're also looking at Texas. We're also looking at, North Carolina, Tennessee, Utah. What do you think? And I'm happy to tell them what I think about the regulatory environments and the struggles that each of those states have. Now, each of those states have amazing things as well, and they're fun to compete with. But yeah, no, I kind of am the enforcer of why Arizona is the best state to do business in, as opposed to Texas, as opposed to, Tennessee or North Carolina or any of the others that are growing.
And you do have the experience in all those states, which
I
is
have
very
a lot,
cool.
but I know the pluses and minuses. There's pluses and minuses to Arizona, but again, Texas is a great state. I love it. I love that it's this economic driver. I love what it stands for, but the power reliability issue is a huge problem for them. And I know they're working on it and they have the money to invest in. That's important, but they're a good lesson for the rest of us too. They did, you would call what is known in the energy world dereg, where they allowed more like entrance into the market. And energy is one of those unique things where the infrastructure is so built out with these capital outlays that if you switch to dereg, it's not really capitalist. It's allowing companies to come in and build off investments others have already made. And it interferes with grid management, which is so complicated. So we kind of learn our lessons from the Texas. Being the newest state in the Great 48, we were able to take all the best practices. And that's why I love Arizona. We're this meritocracy. We're so new. It doesn't matter who your parents are. It doesn't matter even where you went to school. 72% of Arizona is from somewhere else. So they come to Arizona and you can succeed based on talent alone. We're kind of this last bastion of being a meritocracy, and I love it.
The American dream.
It is very true. Yeah.
To the U.S. I love it here, and I love that.
Where'd you move from?
The UK.
The UK. Nice. Okay. I grew up a little bit. My stepdad was in the Navy, so we were stationed over in Scotland, and my brother and I lived in England for a little bit too.
No way. What part?
We were, at the time, was a secret sub base. Now it's not anymore, but it was Glasgow. There's a little town outside called Dunoon that I lived in for many years, formative years of my childhood, which was a lot of fun. And then into London, kind of near the financial district, so near Whitechapel. But yeah,
it's the best humor, I think, of any place.
I love it. Yeah,
it's hilarious.
I wouldn't trade being able to say I've lived in another country for a long period of time. It helps you with the myopic view and understanding things. So yeah.
Well, keep up the good work in Arizona. I can't wait to come out and visit. And thank you for your support. And
anytime, you're welcome. Want to talk more about what you do and what your company does, and we're very excited to see how we can incorporate that in Arizona. So we're a growth state. You need to be in all the growth markets. So come out to Arizona.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it.
Rodney, well, thank you for coming on the show and chatting a little bit about why you're here in Austin and what you're up to at the U.S. Chamber, my former place of work.
Well, you mentioned Harold Kim. Harold's a great guy.
Yes. Oh, he was fantastic. I was there for 2 years, and he's been very welcoming when I go back. And it's exciting now being on like the business side and out of the policy world, really. So I kind of still am a little bit with what we're doing, but it's always good to be back in D.C. How long have you been out there?
I actually was a congressional staffer for 16 years, but I was working in a district office in Illinois before I got elected to serve myself. So I went from district staffer to member of Congress, and I won the closest Republican victory in the nation in 2012. and then spent the next 10 years representing a swing district, a very competitive district in central and southwestern Illinois.
Wow. And what made you want to go from staffer, seeing everything behind the scenes of what actually happens in Congress, to running for Congress?
Well, you always have an interest when you become a staffer of what would it be like, to be the principal, to be the member of Congress. But over my 16 years, I kind of enjoyed the staff side. I enjoyed the campaign side. I was able to go out and work for others to help them get elected. And frankly, was able to put together good teams that made us all really good at it. Even in a state like Illinois, where we would overachieve as Republicans. But I got a call from my then boss, a guy named John Shimkus, and John called me one day in 2012, early 2012. He said, "Hey, did you see the news that one of his colleagues, a guy named Tim Johnson, was going to retire after he won the primary?" And that opened up a selection process to replace him on the ballot. And John, my mentor, my boss, I was with him from day one, said, "I think you ought to do it." And then he said, "I got to go, bye." That was the recruitment that got me thinking about running for Congress. And then all my friends who I helped get elected all said, "You need to do this."
Well, it does prepare you, being a staffer and seeing the campaign side, seeing the dirty stuff, seeing the good stuff. Because I know whenever I was a staffer, I went into politics because I had so many opinions. But then I realized, oh, I work for Congressman Arrington. I represent his opinions. So what types of policy were you working on going from staff then into your own position and being able to voice your own opinions?
Well, I was lucky. My boss, Mr. Shimkus, gave me a lot of latitude to do what I thought was best for him back in Illinois. So a lot of the same issues I worked on, transportation issues, agriculture issues. And then I got to run the committee for the Republicans called House Administration.
Wow.
That's every staffer's dream, because that's how the House operates. And all the times the employees of the House told me, "We can't do this because we've never done it that way," they quit telling me that when I became a member of Congress and had jurisdiction over their bosses. So we made a lot of internal changes that made the House operate better from when I got there in 1997, and then when I got on the committee in 2013, and then when I left in 2023.
So how long was that term?
I was there for 10 years, so 5 terms.
Okay, very exciting. What was your biggest win while you were on the Hill?
I had a lot of wins. I mean, I was the type of legislator, and you could ask your old boss, Jody Arrington, who, has some deficiencies mentally, of course. Let him know I said that, please.
I'll send this to him.
We can go through your entire delegation if you'd like. But I helped legislate on the front end. So a lot of my priorities would get put into the underlying legislation before it would go to the floor, or before it was heard in the committee. But besides transportation reauthorizations, FAA, highway bills, farm bills that I can talk about putting my stamp on, the tax bill of 2017, I can talk about areas where we put our stamp on those. One issue that I promised to address that no one thought we would do was we created a tax incentive to help employers help pay down the student debt of their employees. The irony is we got that tax law written in the CARES Act during a pandemic when no one was thinking about hiring. So a lot of folks didn't realize that that's actually law. And what it does, it really takes the House student loan repayment program and makes it tax-free for everyone using it for up to $5,250. It mirrors tuition reimbursement. Now, here's the irony. That provision was set to expire at the end of 2025, and in the reconciliation bill that just passed, that provision is made permanent. At a time where employers are looking to retain employees, hire new employees, this is a voluntary private sector approach to allow them to do that.
That is awesome. And you have a really impressive background. Tell us what you're up to now at the U.S. Chamber.
U.S. Chamber of Commerce came to me one day after I had left Congress already, was enjoying being a contract lobbyist, had a great 7-figure book of business, and they said, "We want you to come run government affairs." And I said, "No." And I gave them a list of names to call. And then we talked again, and I said, "You know what? Tell me what it's going to be about. Tell me what I can do to actually change the culture and build a team that's going to be able to accomplish the goals that I know only the U.S. Chamber can accomplish. And they laid out a great plan of action, accepted my plan of action, and then we got to work on finalizing my rollover into working at the Chamber. And at the same time, I was able to bring over 3 folks who worked for me on Capitol Hill, and they're just killing it on behalf of the Chamber right now.
That's amazing. How big is your team right now?
Right now, we have about 8 people. We have less people in the Chamber's Government Affairs Division now than when I started. And I believe if you ask anyone on Capitol Hill about our team, they will say we are better, we are more efficient, and we have a more business-like approach, which is exactly what the U.S. Chamber is all about.
Right. I love it. Efficiency. I'm all about the efficiency too. Are y'all using AI at all in your efficiency right now?
Well, you're talking to the old guy of the bunch, one of the old guys. We also have the former House parliamentarian, Tom Wickham. So I'm not the oldest guy in our group, but I'm close. But, I don't use as much AI because that's just not my specialty, whereas I am sure a lot of members of our team are probably utilizing AI. And the Chamber ranks AI and the AI proposed regulatory regime as one of our top priorities because we believe we don't want to hinder what AI can do for a wide range of issues throughout our economy.
Well, it can be used in every field. It's the most exciting kind of industrial revolution we've seen yet with AI. So
certainly.
What are the biggest issues that you're lobbying on behalf of right now for the Chamber?
Well, one of them actually intersects AI, and that is the tax bill, the reconciliation. I came to the Chamber understanding that our number one priority was making sure that the reauthorization of the Trump tax cuts of 2017 was our top priority, because many of the pro-growth provisions that affect small businesses and tax rates, lower tax rates that affect every family in the country, they were set to expire in 2025. And really it seemed like it was so far away when I helped craft the bill back in 2017. 2025 will never get here. Well, here it is. And now what you saw just a week and a half ago, where the Republicans in the House, they came together, they passed that reauthorization. And in that reauthorization, here's that link to AI. They have a 10-year moratorium on state AI rules and regulations that could adversely impact what happens at the national level. The U.S. Chamber doesn't believe that there shouldn't be any rules and regulations over AI.
Sure.
But we have to make sure that we don't hinder the next generation of what we would have considered Google at the time when I was growing up, before internet search engines were invented, of course, by Al Gore.
I love it. Well, appreciate you supporting what we're doing as well in that. So very pro what you're working on. What are you doing today here at the Venture Gala?
Well, I'm actually a sub. So Neil Bradley, he's the guy who recruited me to come to the Chamber. Neil was Eric Cantor, our majority leader's policy director, when I met him when I got to Congress. And being a former staffer, I always knew before I went to my colleagues who were elected like me with an idea, I'd run it by the staff members I trusted first. And Neil was always my go-to guy. I went to him one time. I had a veteran talk to me about an idea. Remember Obamacare? It punishes small business when they get to 30 employees, and then they have to cover every employee, regardless of whether these employees that they have are using their health coverage. So I had a Veterans Advisory Board. That Veterans Advisory Board, one member came to me and said, why don't you exempt veterans who don't use employer health care from counting towards that 30 employee limit? I went to Neil with that idea, and I said, here's my idea, came from a veteran in my district. I'm calling it the Hire More Heroes Act. What do you think? And Neil looked at me and deadpanned, that's a great idea. Next thing I know, I'm debating it on the day I'm getting sworn into my second term, January 3rd of 2015. And the guy who's the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee at the time was none other than Paul Ryan. And he looked at me and said, how come you're doing these things and you're not on the committee? I said, good ideas just don't start at the committee level. They start anywhere. And that's why I'm glad to be part of great ideas at chambers of all levels and companies like yours.
Hire more heroes. Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll get this over to you and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, so tell me more about your background. I know you said that the other chamber CEO was in pharmaceuticals. I think, is that your background as well?
Well, yes, I co-founded a biopharmaceutical company in Memphis in 2005, and we in-licensed our technologies from founding science institutions that were based in Memphis. So I partnered with the Southern College of Optometry on a dry eye product, as well as the University of Tennessee Health Science Center on a product for autoimmune diseases. So
Amazing.
yeah, and of course, we were seeing a lot of success, and then we were out raising capital. We closed a friends and family round of seed capital in the spring of 2008, and we were going to go out for a Series A in the fall of 08, but everything changed in the fall of 08 with Lehman Brothers crash, and we didn't know at the time we were entering a major recession. So raising capital became incredibly difficult to gather. So we hunkered down. We got orphan drug status in the U.S. and in the EU. We filed patents in 50 global markets, kind of waiting on the capital markets to return, but unfortunately they never really did. So fast forward to 2010, our largest investor told me about this new governor who had just been elected and was focusing on entrepreneurship and economic development. And he encouraged me to maybe pursue that, go pay the bills for a little while. And so I thought, well, why not? And I went to the Economic Club of Memphis, where the governor's new commissioner of economic development, Bill Haggerty, was speaking. And I introduced myself to Bill, who was also an entrepreneur and was part of a team that backed MapQuest, and just told him about my background and that I was expressing interest in their opportunities because they were decentralizing economic development. And he said, well, Ted, we'd be thrilled to have you on our team. So I did, got a lot of really exciting projects underway. Nike had a major expansion. International Paper had a major expansion of their global headquarters. And then Bill appointed me as assistant commissioner for innovation and strategy. So I had a lot of different platforms. I did business development, but also had the federal programs, our innovation program for small businesses, rural programs. So I got to do pretty much everything else. And then he appointed me as his chief of staff. So, and then he left after the re-election of Governor Haslam. I went back into the private sector. Of course, he ended up becoming ambassador to Japan, and now he's a U.S. senator from Tennessee. So it's been wonderful to see his trajectory. But both he and Governor Haslam really ran economic development like a private business. And so we saw tremendous success. I mean, we were state of the year in economic development, back-to-back years. So like what Texas has experienced, we did that as well. And I wanted to bring that back to my hometown, Memphis. I didn't move to Nashville. I served the governor close to 8 years. I commuted for 5 of that.
What is that drive?
It's 3 hours.
Wow.
About 200 miles. Yeah. So I would go up on a Monday and back on Friday.
Okay.
But I learned a lot of the principles of economic development and regionalism and focusing on, creating that highly curated concierge level service to businesses. And then business attraction was always a thrill to me. So when I left the administration in the governor's last year of his term, he was term limited, I came back to my alma mater, the University of Memphis, and they created a position for me, actually. The president of the university did. So I became the first chief economic development officer. And I also handled all government relations for the university as well. So we were able to elevate the profile of the university in Nashville, and we ended up securing about $100 million in funding. We ended up getting our Carnegie R1 research designation, which was a tremendous accomplishment. And then I got back into pure economic development with the chamber and was part of the team working with the state of Tennessee on the recruitment of Ford and their largest investment ever in an all-electric vehicle facility right near Memphis. And then I went full-time with the chamber as chief economic development officer and then became president and CEO in 2022. And the rest is history.
Congratulations.
So that was a long-winded answer to your
That was
question
fantastic.
about my background. But I've got the private and public sector experience, and I think the intersection of that has afforded me the ability to see Memphis's economy grow.
Well, you're the perfect guest. That's what we like
Thank
to
you.
talk about all the time.
I do too.
The intersection of business and
Yeah.
policy and private sector and public
Exactly.
sector. And how, your background's very impressive. You're an entrepreneur at heart, which I think is perfect for this type of
Yeah,
position to help
it is.
economic development.
That's right.
How did you get into pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, so it was kind of fortuitous. Honestly, I had been working in consulting, and I was matchmaking entrepreneurs, startups, founders with technology. And so we were focused on tech commercialization, and I was putting these teams together, and then I thought, well, gosh, what am I doing? I could do this myself, and I want to be a part of this. So we identified a technology, and I had been working with a couple of founders, and one in particular, he approached me. He said, well, I'd love to license this and pursue this technology, but I'll only do it with you if you come along with me. And I said, well, let's go. Let's go for it. And so, we were the first company that was securing investment from a new fund that was created in Memphis called Innova. So we were Fund 1, Investment 1. We were the first company in the biotech accelerator there. So we had a lot of really interesting success early on, but unfortunately the economic climate became very challenging.
What do you think about that climate now? I know a lot of people are saying it's very difficult for getting funding and startups. What are you seeing?
It is. I think that landscape has not changed. And in fact, even then, back in the 2008, 2009 era, the FDA was not approving a lot of new products.
Sure.
And so the regulatory environment is wrought with challenges and barriers, which is why we domiciled in the UK, and we pursued our orphan drug designation in the EU, because we felt like we could probably advance clinical trials easier there. But clinical trials are expensive, and it takes capturing that capital to do it. We also partnered with potential strategic companies, alliances. Nothing ever really formed because we were just too early stage. So so it was challenging, and I don't think that has changed at all.
We're hearing a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
So you're telling me a lot about some of the projects that you
Yes.
have coming to Tennessee
Yes.
and to Memphis specifically.
Yeah.
So tell me what you're most excited about.
Yeah, well, Memphis is known as a global logistics hub. Obviously, we're home to FedEx global headquarters, many other transportation companies. In fact, we've got the highest concentration of a location quotient of logistics professionals in the U.S., over 3,600 companies. And so there's a lot of specialty in that space. We have all the modalities of transportation: rail, river, road, runway. We call them the 4 R's. But I have been focused on that diversification of our economy. And we had identified tech. We had identified advanced manufacturing. We were tracking data. And in 2018, Memphis was selected by Brookings to go through this economic inclusive indicators lab. And out of that, we ended up with 31 indicators of our economy that measured the strength or the lack thereof. And we took that and we compared ourselves with 9 other cities that were similar to Memphis, kind of in the central spine of the U.S. So Milwaukee, St. Louis, Nashville, New Orleans, St. Louis. Yeah. So we wanted to compare ourselves, and we did not fare very well. We were kind of in the last quartile of the indicators with those cities, but there was one indicator that Memphis was number 1, and that was the percentage of IT positions held by African Americans.
Ah, interesting.
So we had a high concentration of Black tech talent, and so I begged the question, what does that look like nationally? And we looked at the top 53 markets in the U.S. and looked at the same data point, and we were still number 1. Atlanta was number 2, and it wasn't even close. But Atlanta had really marketed themselves in that space. So we began targeting tech companies that were looking at diversifying their workforce. I mean, Apple at that time was less than 1% Black in their workforce.
Wow.
And then you had the McKinsey report come out. You had the Wall Street Journal article that said, look, if you're a tech CEO and you want to diversify your workforce, you have to go to where that workforce is. And predominantly it's concentrated in the Southeast. And Memphis being the largest metro area with the highest population of African Americans, we felt like we were well suited. So I went to all of the tech companies directly. I met with Microsoft and at their headquarters. I toured their headquarters. I shared with them the stats on our workforce, and they said, Ted, we love this. This is incredible. We had no idea. We wish we had known this 2 years ago before we committed to Atlanta.
Wow.
So it was a kind of a false victory, but it did crystallize in my mind that we had something to build from. And in a conversation that I had with FedEx founder and chairman, Mr. Fred Smith, he coined the phrase digital delta, because so many other markets around the country were replicating Silicon Valley. You had New Orleans want to be the Silicon Bayou, and he said, we're not that, but we are the digital delta. And so with his permission, the chamber trademarked that, and we began using that as a platform to market Memphis in a new way. And fast forward to last year, when we were approached by XAI, a startup, as we were told. We had the opportunity to sell them on the same attributes. And fortunately for them, they were focused on speed and power. AI is a race, and Elon is entering this race behind because you had other much more mature platforms already out there. So they needed to build quickly, and they wanted to do it at scale. So he wanted to build the world's largest supercomputer. Well, you've got to have a lot of space to do that. You have to have a lot of power. And the chamber helped coordinate and quarterback all of that with all of our government partners, all levels. And we really expedited everything. We kind of vertically integrated the entire process. Economic development is usually a long cycle.
Absolutely.
And instead of doing things sequentially, we did them, vertically, concurrently, all at the same time. And so they had a timeline, and this was March of 2024, mind you. And they said they wanted to be with infrastructure in place and power turned on June 1st. That's the fastest anybody has ever moved. But the expectation was high. And fortunately, we had everyone buy into that belief system that Memphis could do this. This was no data center, right? This was a computational cluster where they were going to be computing the data, not storing it, but learning from it. And then, generating a product platform from that, which is called Grok, Grok. And they're on their third version of that. But they have built a supercluster computer that has 225,000 NVIDIA chips, thousands and thousands of servers from Dell and Supermicro. And it's a phenomenon. They call it Colossus.
Wow.
So that's now based in Memphis, Tennessee, of all places. We love it.
And I'm sure that's a trickle effect. So
Absolutely.
Congratulations on getting that deal and that partnership, having them come to your city and your hometown.
Right.
So
gotta love that.
Why should other tech companies move to Memphis?
Well, I think we've proven that they can scale incredibly quickly. And with AI and any technology, I think power generation is going to be really at the epicenter of how they scale, what size of operation they can build. And in this case, we're talking not just megawatts, but gigawatts of power. And so that requires a tremendous amount of infrastructure to be built out. And fortunately in Memphis, we were able to prove that concept and build at scale. For instance, XAI was able to build a substation right on site that now provides 150 megawatts. They'll double that in size just in the next year. They'll bring a second substation online, so that will be 300 megawatts. And they have just acquired a new building. It's 1 million square feet, and this is part of their plan to approach 1 million GPUs. So all of this requires tremendous amount of power. And they are in the process now of looking at how they generate that power at 1.2 gigawatts. So that is why Memphis has placed itself in that position. And then last week we had Google announce a major data center. They're going to invest $10 billion in a 4-building complex in West Memphis, which is technically Arkansas, but it's literally right across the Mississippi River from us. And we were pleased to work with West Memphis on recruiting Google there. So suddenly, Memphis is known now globally, and we're talking with companies like NVIDIA, Dell, and Supermicro on what it looks like to have a major presence there, because now they have a lot of their customers in close proximity. Amazon is in Jackson, Mississippi area, building a major data center there. I think that's close to $30 billion. XAI was $12 billion. I think they're going to invest another $40 billion in Memphis this year. So we're seeing economic development at a scale that's unprecedented for Memphis.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned some of the workforce that you have that are very, high tech.
Yes.
Are those the people that are taking a lot of these jobs, or are you seeing that people are needing workforce training? What's that looking like?
Yeah, so all of the above. But what we know is that XAI currently has 300 folks working full time. 82% of those are Memphians.
Wow.
Which is what we love.
That's great.
Obviously, we want in-migration of new talent, data scientists, computational engineers. But the fact that the company is committed to Memphis and growing the Memphis economy and providing opportunities, they pay at Palo Alto rates. So everyone in that facility is earning 6 figures. And when you're in Memphis, that goes a long way. So we have one of the lowest costs of living rates in the country. So people that are moving in go, wow, this is incredible. I can really provide for my family. I can raise a family. I can buy a really great place to live. And then Memphis is really cool. We've got a cool factor. So we've got the blues and barbecue and all of those things. But culturally, we're diverse, and we have a lot to offer in terms of living and lifestyles.
Exciting time.
Yeah.
Can't wait to talk like in a year or two, see where you guys are.
I know.
How has the regulatory environment been for you and the state overall? Is it, very business friendly? Is that another reason you're seeing this influx of people?
Yeah, Tennessee as a whole is business friendly. And I know Tennessee and Texas are very similar in many aspects. And so that business climate is very inviting to this kind of investment. We also do not have an income tax. So that's very appealing to corporations and executives as they consider where to domicile. But yeah, in terms of the AI space, obviously power and generation is critical. But XAI is coming in, and they're actually investing $80 million in what will be the world's largest wastewater facility. Oh, wow. Memphis sits on an aquifer, and we have some of the purest water in the country.
That's amazing.
We have 100 trillion gallons of water in our aquifer. So that's a precious asset for us. We love drinking water straight from our tap. It doesn't have to be filtered.
Wow.
That's really great for firms like St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, where they're doing clinical development on pharmaceuticals to treat childhood cancers. So they don't have to spend as much on filtering the water. It's great for food manufacturing and beverage manufacturing. So we have great beer. It tastes great because the water's great. But that being said, we have needed vital infrastructure. And so XAI at their own cost is coming in and building this wastewater facility that will actually save 4 to 5 billion gallons of our aquifer water every year. Wow. That's tremendous.
I lived in Tennessee,
yes,
as you know, but it was about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I know it's changing a lot. If I was to come to Memphis today, where would you tell me to go first?
Oh my gosh. Well, first I would tell you to stay downtown.
Okay.
We're home to the South's Grand Hotel, the Peabody.
Yes.
Where they have the ducks in the lobby. That's a spectacle in and of itself. They come march down into the lobby every day in the morning at 11, and they go back upstairs to their duck penthouse on the roof at 5 p.m. So you have to do that. We also have really cool boutique hotels downtown. But I would say, your first stop has got to either be the National Civil Rights Museum or Graceland, of course, the home of Elvis Presley. And I'm honoring the king of rock and roll today with my shoes that nobody can see.
They're
But-
amazing, by the way. Tell us more about them.
Yeah, so they say it's embroidered with TCB and a lightning bolt, and Elvis coined that, taking care of business in a flash. And that's what we're doing in Memphis. We're taking care of business in a flash, and that's why we were able to win XAI. So it seemed very poignant today to be here and tell our story as to how we got here.
I love that. And what a note to leave on. So we'll have to show these, but these are blue, like navy blue, very tasteful, blue
Yes.
suede shoes. We will show a picture after, so we're not going to
Cool.
get your feet up in there. But what a note. And I am very excited to come visit Memphis again soon. So
You're
thank you
welcome
so much for
anytime.
coming on.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tell me who you are and why you're here today at the Texas Venture Forum.
Yes. So my name is William Steele. I'm currently the CEO and one of the co-founders of a company called SupplyPay.
Cool.
SupplyPay, man, we got started a little over 16 months ago now, so
Okay.
pretty new. It all started, my wife is also an incredible entrepreneur. We have a family restaurant down in an area in South Texas called the Rio Grande Valley.
That's awesome.
And somebody brought in my co-founder. We had a bowl of soup together. And one thing led to another. He was talking about interest rate environments, how much trade happens between Mexico and the United States. So I built a small little MVP. We started to test these ideas together. We kept pulling that ball of yarn, and here we are. Last year, we helped finance over $2.5 million in trade between Mexican exporters and buyers here in the U.S., mostly in the fresh produce space. So like think cucumbers, avocados, bell peppers, tomatoes. We get a lot of fresh produce from Mexico that we consume here in the United States. Roughly around like 20 to 25% of the produce we eat comes from Mexico. And a majority of that produce moves through a town here in Texas called McAllen Far. So these are two different towns in the same area. As an example, I think last year across the Far Reynosa Bridge, we crossed like over $200 million worth of celery.
Oh, wow.
Just in celery. Yeah. And so as we continued to help these clients, we realized that there were more areas to solve than just the financing, right? We were initially solving what are called long or unstable cash flow conversion cycles in cross-border trade. We come to find out that there's a lot of other issues, maybe knowing where the truck is, maybe having correct documentation when you get to the port. So we started to build some other really cool pieces of functionality for our users that we found have really helped to strengthen their businesses and helped to strengthen and stabilize that trade between Mexico and the United States. More particularly, our concentration of clients is all in the Texas region, right? So we're a Texas company that started here in the McAllen area. We work really closely with a lot of friends and partnerships and investors here in Austin. And that's kind of like where we're at now. We're just continuing to build, work with clients, and continue to understand how we can be more of service to them and their businesses.
So did you meet your co-founder completely randomly at the restaurant?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It was actually, we have a lot to thank to Miss Persephone. So Miss Persephone is one of the team members at the Center of Innovation and Commercialization, which is essentially a University of Texas school system extension program that is in a town called Weslaco, which is a really small town.
I am familiar. I worked for the governor a couple of sessions back, and we went down to the border all the time and went to McAllen specifically and Weslaco. So I have been.
Yeah, so Weslaco, well, that's good. Most people don't know. It's
yeah,
awesome that
I've been
you know.
down there. It's far drive.
Yes.
I did it a couple of times. But,
About 5 hours from Austin. Yeah. So you in Weslaco, Miss Persephone saw Jorge. He comes from an extensive background in cross-border trade. He was an accountant for an exporting co-op in central Mexico. They mostly did Roma tomatoes, and then later was selected to become the CFO of a fresh produce importing company based in McAllen, which again, if you throw a stick in McAllen, you're going to hit like 5 fresh produce importers. It's a really high concentration of that particular customers. And Jorge was the CFO, took that company, helped them grow from 10 to like 30 million a year, was doing his MBA program, created a concept called Veggie Ventures, which would one day become SupplyPay after we teamed up. So Persephone saw his project. She knew me from building different things. I actually was in a quite similar space, building a civic media platform for a while.
Yes, we need to chat more about that.
Yes,
after this,
I would.
Absolutely.
I could go on and on about that. I really have a sweet spot for helping people communicate information that happen in town hall hearings. Like AI can really help in those spaces. I've listened to your conversation earlier. Like, you clearly understand the benefits and how you can communicate information, multilingual information. In Texas, we have a lot of native Spanish speakers.
Right.
In Houston, a lot of Vietnamese speakers. It's a cultural melting pot, and it's good for everyone to see all of that. Stephanie thought we should team up, and we did. It was a really great interaction. Initially, I didn't think I was going to be building it because I was very busy working on my civic media platform.
Okay.
But more and more that Jorge talked, I was like, man, this is a really interesting problem set, and he's a really nice guy. So I just thought, like, I'll try to help him, whether it's with someone else to partner with or myself. Like, I just want to help him be successful. And in the process, I was like, you know what? Let me ask my wife if this is a good idea. And she has a really good business sense as well. So she was like, this sounds like a good idea. You should just like try to build something and see if it works. So I took a few weeks, built the MVP, and it was a much quicker product market fit and a much quicker and clearer business plan. In the government space, it can be hard. Who do you sell to? The government? Do you sell to the people? Do you know?
You have to have a niche,
Yes.
or it's too broad.
I was 2 years of me wandering the wilderness trying to figure out that solution.
There's a lot of users. Is it B2C? Is it B2B? Which one do you do? We're B2B, and we're specific to stakeholders. We can talk more offline about it, but I agree.
Yeah.
You have to get and know your customer base.
Yeah.
So who is your current customer?
Right now, it's fresh produce importers.
Okay.
So that's who a lot of our software enhancements and kind of like operational enhancements and value adds are. We also work a lot with exporters in Mexico. They really need the financing of what we do. So mostly fresh produce importers here in the United States. These are companies that sell to retailers like Walmart, H-E-B, Kroger, HelloFresh, Publix. I can go on and on. I actually just got back from a really interesting trip in Canada, in Ontario.
Tell me about it.
So you would never believe it, but there's like probably over 10,000 acres of commercial greenhouses in 2 towns in Ontario. And the towns are called Leamington and Kingsville.
Okay.
And it felt like I was in McAllen. Why? Because I would go to the grocery store and everybody was Latino. I was like, hey, what's up, guys? Like, asking them where they're from. But these were Latinos from all over the world. I mean, they were there providing value to the economy through all of the work that needs to be done, right? Like, these are massive, massive greenhouse operations. And these are, skilled workers that know how to work in greenhouses. It was really interesting to see. It was like, man, it's a border region right between Detroit and so Canada, US, just like McAllen, between Mexico, the United States. So it was really cool to see. But there were some really large importers there that I was meeting with, and you find that there are these kind of pockets in different regions of like large importing for whether it's automotive or fresh produce. It could be medical supplies. Roundabout way of answering your question: importers, particularly in the fresh produce space, but our software is sector agnostic. So we've actually been working with clients that do e-commerce that is not just Mexico, United States. Our software can apply over ocean as well. So we do e-commerce from Vietnam to the United States. We're interested in other sectors. We have one client right now who's working with us to do rubber tires from different parts of Southeast Asia to the United States. So anyone that's in import or export that sells to the United States, it can be a really good fit. We can help to streamline their businesses.
Well, I love to hear your founder story, first of all, because that's, I think, the basis of, knowing where a company is going to be very successful, is having a really good co-founder relationship. That's how I felt. I met my co-founder on a Y Combinator matching program, actually.
Nice.
And the other is my husband. So,
nice.
But
that's the best.
It's so great. Yeah. So we all get along really well. I think that's like the biggest, most important thing, that you can get through problems and like each other. But also seeing the problem in the market. That makes sense that Jorge found the problem and that there was some gap in what was going on, and that's where some of the best companies are built. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
how have tariffs affected your recent work and the uncertainty in that level?
I think the biggest way, it's funny enough, the biggest way it's impacted our business is more from investors being uncertain. And, during our last round, we raised a pre-seed round. We were targeting $1 million. We were oversubscribed to 2.1, which is like, it was incredible to find those partners. We found a really great group of investors during that time. And a few that I really wanted to come in, they couldn't get over that uncertainty. And it's okay because it was, nobody knew where up and down was going to be in a few months. Even now, it's still a little uncertain on the horizon. But from a customer perspective, it actually brought a lot more people, it brought a lot of potential uncertainty to the forefront of these operators, right? So a lot of the exporters, a lot of the importers are like, man, what happens if, my commodity gets tariffed an additional percent? How am I preparing? Of course, in the supply chain, the retailers are hosting meetings, and like Walmart and H-E-B, they're all communicating with their suppliers as efficiently as they can. But, in several chains of communication, things get lost, they get fragmented. Different departments need to be tracking different things. It's quite a lot of gears moving together. So what it did was, when we come and talk to our customers, we say, hey, we can help consolidate some of that communication, make sure that those documents are done correctly, right? Especially when you're talking about bills of lading or purchase orders, right? So as the tariffs shift and different commodities are essentially taxed at different rates, you need to reflect that accordingly in how you're pricing, right? And that has to do with negotiation and procurement, and all the way upstream to the buyer. What is their pricing? How does it change your contract, and how does that change your supplier's contract? So all of that needs to be done at a low latency, and that's essentially what we've been working on. That's what we've been building. That's what we saw would be a way of improving those business processes. And so the customers are actually like, hey, that sounds like a great solution. Can we talk more about that? They're reaching out. They're trying to understand more on how we can help ease that uncertainty and that anxiety, especially in the communication process in the supply chain. So it helped in that regard. And then, of course, in general, people are looking to be more strategic as operators. Like exporters are like, hey, if invoice sizes change and I need additional liquidity, where can I find those options? So, the uncertainty, there's opportunity. You just have to be able to see what that path is, and then really get yourself in front of those right customers with the right messaging. So it's been interesting.
I bet it's an exciting time for you, and congratulations on the raise.
Thank you.
In an uncertain time as well. We were just talking about that with one of the chamber CEOs, that it's a very uncertain time for investors in general. So that's very exciting. And where can people find you if they're looking for? You've got a customer listening on the line here.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're an operator and you're somebody who you think this can help with, just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Just William Steele, straight on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive there. If you can also go check out our website, supplypay.io. But I will get back to you the quickest, especially if you're messaging me on LinkedIn as a customer and we can connect. I can get you to the right person. We can get on a call, and, heck, I'll drive to you, even if you're in Guanajuato, I'll come down. It doesn't matter.
I love that. The scrappiness, the startup life.
Yes.
Well, keep up the good work, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I did have a buddy of mine who I actually met playing hockey, who, when he was in 5th or 6th grade, he got a hold of his dad's magazine collection. Which would have been interesting to the young boys that time, and he made a mint selling those magazines secondhand at school until somebody found out and brought it to his parents' attention.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
How old were they?
He was probably 10 at the time.
That
10
is
or 11.
really funny.
Yeah.
If my kid did that, I don't know what I'd do, because that's pretty.
He said he didn't make any money with the elementary school kids, but the middle school boys were his target market.
Good. Mark, that's a good intro. Who are you? What do you do?
Well, I'm Mark Crumblish. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Eagle Venture Lab, which is a venture studio in Fort Worth. And for those of you who don't know what a venture studio is, it's a venture capital funded company that launches other companies. And so we ideate, found or co-found, launch, operate, grow, and detach eventually other companies. How venture studios are different from accelerators, incubators, and venture funds. A venture fund is going to raise money and do a little bit of diligence on a lot of different entities, and they're going to use portfolio theory to make a lot of bets, and then deploy that capital and use what is known as the power law, where 1 in about every 10 of those companies will return the value of the entire investment in those 10. They just don't know which one. And venture funds are usually not tremendously active in the diligence after a company launches. They might sit on the board, but they're not really operating and rolling up their sleeves every day. A venture studio is different in that we're very narrowly focused and highly specialized. So since my co-founder partner Wade he's a former Army Ranger, I'm a Naval Academy grad and a former naval aviator. We bring a military discipline and kind of a special warfare mentality to what we do, where everybody is really good at their particular specialty. Everybody can do a little bit of everything, but we all have our particular niches. And then our business vertical that we focus on generally it's B2B SaaS. We do only B2B SaaS with a concentration in fintech and business process improvement. So extremely narrow focus, very tight. We use the same team on every launch. So the same back office, from accounting to finance, other infrastructure. We use the same developer, same marketing team, same CTO, same engineering team. So we don't have any of the normal problems of, forming, storming, norming, then performing. We go right to performing. And to give you an example, the last 2 companies that we launched we co-founded, which is unusual for us. We usually found exclusively, but we co-founded. Each of them went from start to being fully branded in less than 2 weeks. And then they completed their MVP in less than 6 weeks and were earning revenue in less than 3 months.
Wow.
So that's a lot faster than you normally do, because the operators are not consumed with raising money. They don't have to bother doing that. We essentially get them funded from day one, and that they don't have to do things like find an attorney, find an accountant, get back office systems set up, build a tech stack. They don't have any of that. It's just they go right to essentially marketing, developing their product, and selling.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
And I have a ton of questions about the venture studio side.
Sure.
So first, thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
What did you do in the Navy?
I flew jets off aircraft carriers and did some test flying for about 8 years. So loved the flying, loved the people. Didn't like living on a ship very much. I was away from home a lot.
Sure.
But was happy to do that. I would say it's the most fun that you can have, fully clothed. But the time away from home is extremely difficult. You spend a lot of time. So even in my war was the first Gulf War. Even before that happened, in a three-year squadron tour, I was gone 22 months. And out of all the squadrons that flew the same airplane that I did, we were gone the least of anybody. So everybody else was gone more than 22 months out of a 36-month tour. So it's very, very hard on the family life, and you never really feel like you're grounded and rooted. But that's why they call it the service, right? You're out there serving and doing your thing. So I was very happy and proud to do that, serve for 12 years. But it was time to do something different. I was ready to have a different kind of lifestyle. And I didn't want to just fly airplanes. I wanted to own them. You're not going to do that on a naval officer salary. At the time I used to say landing on aircraft carriers at night was probably the stupidest thing you could do for $38,000 a year, which is about what I was earning at the time. But boy, it was fun. It was a lot of fun doing that.
An amazing experience. I felt like that about the government. Working on Capitol Hill, I made less than that, and it was brutal, but it was so fun. And it was like a master's degree. I'm glad I didn't go do that. I'm glad I went and took that time to do it, because the experience was everything.
It was very much, and as I recognized that I wasn't going to stay in the Navy, I knew I knew I was kind of entrepreneurial and I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know the difference between a bed sheet and a balance sheet. I didn't know anything.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the obvious thing to do was to get an MBA. But my grades at the Naval Academy, let's say, were less than stellar. I like to say I graduated in the top 5% of the bottom 1/3 of my class. And so I had to actually get a master's to get a transcript strong enough to get into a top tier program. And so I started a master's. I got one from Tennessee, and then got an MBA at Kellogg. And then I went into defense for a few years, spun off of technology. I was the guy going, hey, what could we do with this technology in the commercial market? And defense it's a very honorable industry, but it's not very creative. And I remember one of the engineers in the room, when I said that, leaned over to his buddy and said, oh no, another Blinken idea guy, except he didn't say Blinken. And I said, well, maybe you can just indulge me, at some point, and convinced the team to do a brainstorming session. And I brought in pizza and Nerf guns. I mean, these were like, if you remember the comic strip Dilbert, with the Dilbert, the plastic pocket liners, and if you can think of the most cloistered engineering culture that you can imagine, with a very stereotypical engineering group, that's what this team was like. And long story short, we ended up creating a few ideas, and I reduced them to PowerPoint slides and wallpapered my office with this stuff. And about, 8 months later, I came into the office one day, and my lead systems engineer, his name is Mike, is a principal investigator for a DARPA project. So DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. That's who our customer was. But he was about my height, so only about 5'8", and he was about 280 pounds. And this was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in the middle of winter, and it's like 3 degrees outside. But he's standing in my office at 7:30, looking at my office wall, and he's sweating like profusely. I said, Mike, what's up? And he said, I think we can build this thing. And so we sat down and sketched out how to build it. And a couple of years later, it took a while, but we eventually spun that off and created a commercial company around it with what turned out was another venture studio partner. And 3.5 years after we launched it, Motorola bought it for $250 million. And I kind of said, I think I want to do more of that.
Wow.
That seems like a better business model than punching a clock and
Congrats.
get a paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. So in layman's terms, for people new to venture studio, can you describe the full cycle of from founding idea? Is it you and your co-founder that come up with the ideas, and then you have the team kind of full cycle do it? Can you just tell us in short version how that works?
Sure, as short as I can make it.
Sure.
So there's two models that we use. One is the self-founded, and the other is co-founded.
Okay.
So the only difference between the two really is who spends most of the operating time on a day-to-day basis. So obviously, if we self-found, is my partner and I, either one of us will start out as the CEO, and the team rallies around us, and we build the model around that. In the other model, it's the co-founder, and we're providing the same kind of role support, but not necessarily as the CEO. We're going to be either the chairman or operations lead or something like that, but we're filling a vital role in that. And then the cycle is we'll use a small amount of capital to start with, very small. You're talking about $30,000, $40,000 to seed that stage. And the first thing we're going to do is validate that there's a market.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to build anything.
Yep.
You're not even going to sell anything. You're just going to talk to a lot of people who are in your target market set, or also who are your potential exit acquirers. Mm-hmm. You want to talk to them first. Ideally, you want to go in to the venture beginning with the end in mind. How are you going to get out of this? Once it's validated, then we're essentially going into an MVP phase where we're primarily a fintech or a B2B SaaS app. So we're going to start with clickable prototypes. And in the case of financial products, we don't engineer them. We actually will build them in Google Sheets or in Excel, and just build an interface behind it that's transparent to the customer. And oftentimes the output is a PDF. They don't really care whether it's Applified. some point, because all you're trying to do is essentially get product market fit. And we'll stay in that stage as long as we need to, either to shut it down and say there's nothing here, or to keep pivoting and adjusting until we validate that there's product market fit. In other words, what can you actually buy, right? When you're selling things, you go, okay, now we have something. At that point, we'll do a minimum amount of engineering. So we ended up doing engineering a lot later in the cycle than most fintech app companies do. In some cases, we've stayed in that stage for 2 years before I spent a penny on engineering.
So cool.
So we keep our burn rates extremely low. And so investors really like that. We keep track of that all the time, and we don't turn on that high spend rate. Then, of course, you scale from that point as a normal company. Right about at that point, if we don't have our own CEO, we have what we call an entrepreneur in residence program. So we have a set of candidates of other entrepreneurial CEOs who we know we can put in a position. Dustin Logan, who runs one of our companies, Proforma, is one of those. He actually was an angel investor in Eagle Venture Lab and all of our portfolio companies, and hung out with us for 6 months. And after a while, Wade and I decided, he's the right guy to run that company. And I was running it at that point. Like, he's going to be better. Let's put him in that chair and free me up to do something else. And that was one of the greatest decisions that we've made. Right. So that's how we do it, and grow it from there. And ideally at about a Series A, we'll raise enough money for them to kind of detach from the mothership, and they'll have their own infrastructure and overhead. They'll have the capital to go do that and grow on their own. So that's the model.
That is very cool. Last question. Most notable companies that have come out of this?
Well, we've only been in business as a lab for 3 years.
Okay, sure.
Okay, and so we have 7 in the portfolio.
Wow.
3 of them are fintech. One is Proforma, which helps entrepreneurs essentially raise capital. It's a fantastic tool set, extremely cheap for entrepreneurs to overcome all those hurdles that you need to be attractive to a capital allocator. Second company is called Profit Inc. So that helps established companies figure out what's going on in their business and what are the top 3 things they can do right now to become substantially more profitable and double or triple their business value. We can do what McKinsey or BCG does. They'll charge you $750,000 in some cases and take 6 months. I can do that in 48 hours for a tiny fraction of the cost.
Wow.
Using software. Another company is in commercial real estate, so it's targeted at repurposing commercial buildings in major cities that are being underutilized and are likely going to be upside down on their debt service, and help them find buyers and repurpose it. That's a huge discontinuity that's going to happen in the market. 2 of the other companies are using AI technology in an array of initiatives in for-profit B2B applications to combat human trafficking.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And they're doing extremely well.
That was my favorite policy area.
It's really, really cool. Launched a venture studio that's co-branded in Singapore. It's used Eagle Venture Lab Asia. They're doing similar things to what we're doing, and we're about to launch an AI company that we're keeping kind of under the radar right now.
Wow.
2 others in the queue after that, but I got to validate that there's a market first.
Totally get it. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is awesome.
Thank you.
We'll chat more offline.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, so Jessika, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Jessika Calder. I'm going into my junior year at TCU. I'm 19, which I think shocks a lot of people. But actually, so I graduated high school in 3 years, decided it was not the place for me. I had like an entrepreneurial brain. I was like, I got to go.
Yeah.
So then I spent a year at UNT. And then after deciding what I wanted to do, what I wanted to get into, which is more of that high finance role, I thought I wanted to go straight IB. I decided to transfer to TCU, thankfully with the support of my mom. She's great. So we're first-gen Americans. My brother and I are first-gen Americans. My mom and my dad immigrated from Australia. Yeah. So we definitely have that background of like work hard, play hard, but like you're going to work hard and you're going to work for everything you have and you're going to give it your all, which I think has proven really beneficial. Now getting into building my professional career, where I started in marketing and then I went into brand strategic growth. So I still do some of that. I work at the tequila company, a social media marketing firm, and then to consumer goods like apparel stores. And I really just help them develop their brand image and their communications and their strategy with growth and launch, and really just helping and serving as a brainstorming device, I guess, for those companies. Then moving into now, I'm a policy intern with the Texas AI Association.
Yes.
And then I also do business strategy for a defense and security aviation firm out in Arlington.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
I love it. And I know that's how we met, was through Ben at the AI Association. And I was very impressed with you right away. And he told me the story of how you met. And do you mind sharing how you started working with the AI Association? Because to me, it shows some hustle. And I love it.
Yeah. So the event that I met Ben at is a wealth tech fintech cohort hosted by the Founders Arena. And this was for their fall cohort. So I think only last semester. And I guess a big selling point for myself there, because I had one of my other connections and he got me a student ticket to go, because I had seen this event and I was like, oh my goodness, Brig, like I want to go to this event so bad. And he said, let me text Pam. So we texted Pam, who's the founder and president of the Founders Arena out in Arlington. She got me a ticket. So I am going at it, this event. I love it. I'm listening to every speaker. I am talking to every person. I have my student business cards. So they have my LinkedIn QR code on them. It has all my contact information. And I'm just talking it up, right? Yapping. And then I enjoy, right? I know, right? It's a shocker. The beginning part of the event was amazing. And then I went to cocktail hour after. And, you know, I'm just finding people to sit with. And I find some of these like wealth tech guys. And then I see Ben kind of just, you know, with his plate of food, like wandering. And I was like, oh my gosh, here, like, do you need somewhere to sit? And he's like, yeah, I do actually. I said, here, come sit with me. Like, and then we just hit it off and we just started talking, and he's become my absolute favorite person. He's just so funny, and something that I know I really look for and appreciate in people is people that are generous with their time and their knowledge. And that is something that Ben was with, like, right off the bat. And we were talking and he said, oh, you know, there's this person here that I really want to meet. Her name's Barbara. And I said, oh my gosh, I met Barbara earlier. Here, I'll go introduce you. So then I brought Ben over and introduced him to Barbara, who I had just met like 10 hours earlier. But that, I guess, kind of served as the starting point. And then he told me he did his due diligence on me, which I was not aware. He's like, oh yeah, I went and talked to people and asked about you. I said, well, I guess I wouldn't expect any less, but that's kind of like scary. Like that kind of makes me nervous, because the first day of that event, I was 18. And then the second day of the event was my 19th birthday. Okay. So yeah, he's known me since I was like a baby.
Well, I relate a lot, because when I was 19, I was hanging out with, you know, people twice my age, and they didn't know I was 19 and I was in college doing all the things. Definitely relate a lot. And I didn't know your backstory of your family coming from Australia. Yeah. So that's really cool. Mine's from the UK. So was born and raised in the UK. And
that's darn Commonwealth, you know.
I know, crazy. Well, I came for the American dream. And I feel like those people, you know, you're not necessarily given anything or handed anything. So you really work for it. And I think that's why that story really resonated with me. I remember when I was 19, I wanted to work in DC. And I had absolutely no DC connections or family or anything to do with it. But I love politics and wanted to do it. I was in student government. And one day I went over to the chief of staff for the senator and said, hi, I want to come work for Senator Sessions. And he's just like, are you smart? I was like, yes, sir. And he's like, send me your resume. And I heard nothing back. And I went to every conference, met with every person. And one of my favorite contacts who I appreciate to this day was Joe Bonner, former congressman, who I met at an event. And I called him and said, I really want this job in DC. And 10 minutes later, I get a call from Senator Sessions' office saying, you got the job in DC, come up this summer for the internship. And it was like, wow, this is crazy. Just making your own network is so huge. And from then, I've never like applied to a job, really. It's really been through a network. And so I think you're just doing the exact right thing. And it's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely been, oh, sorry, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do, but keep going.
Okay. It's definitely been a process. I think that especially now, you know, with the Gen Z split into two groups, right? It's I don't know, I'm going to school, like I'll figure it out later, like just having a degree will get me a job. And then there's the other side that like puts an insane amount of pressure on themselves, like very much overachievers. And I feel like that's part of, you know, every generation. But it's like, if you don't know what you want to do by freshman year, like you're lost, like you're not going to get a job, you're not going to get employed. That's a huge trend that we've been seeing, especially socially with Gen Z, that we're, you know, terrified you're not going to be employed. You know, you see a lot of in the news of all the entry-level jobs being taken or automated by AI, which it's like, okay, just you got to shift your skill set to then adapt to AI being implemented. So I think that really having that grit, but then also taking the time to figure out what you want to do, like knowing you want to do politics right off the bat, what a blessing. It definitely gave you the right path to like just go in and go get it. I mean, I started marketing. I actually, at the end of high school, thought I wanted to go into the military. I thought I wanted to go to the Coast Guard.
Wait, this is so weird. I went to military school and did officer training for the Coast Guard.
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
That's so
I
weird.
love the Coast Guard.
What made you want to love the Coast Guard?
I wanted to be stationed in Alaska. I'm not gonna lie. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, I want to go and like keep eyes on Russia and China. And no one else wants to go to Alaska, so I know I'll get it. And how cool would that be to say that I worked in Alaska? So yeah, that's initially what I wanted to do. And then I actually have my Eagle Scout, which is something that a lot of people don't know. Cool. Girls were allowed in Scouts BSA February of 2019. So I'm a founding member of my troop in Grapevine, but I actually got my Eagle Scout, and through Scouts BSA, we attended a merit badge college at Tarleton, which is like a weekend. You can get 3 merit badges, and I took an entrepreneurship class, and I came back and I was like, Mom, I'm not going to the military. I'm going to school. And she was like, Jessika, you're an idiot. Who is going to take you right now? Like you graduate in 3 months. We got to figure this out fast then if that's what you want to do. So she was really supportive in the whole process that it took me to like, find the path that I wanted to get on. And there are a lot of twists and turns. And I find that if you're so rigid, like, yeah, the world's going to snap you. You got to be like a fruit by the foot.
I totally agree.
Flexible.
Well, you said that exactly with AI and all the constant changes. I think it's really good that you're giving Gen Z a really good representation right now, and it's really good to hear those types of things. Thanks. But that's a really small world about the Coast Guard stuff. We should chat offline about it.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap, what is next for you? What are you going to do? Do you know what you are ready to do next? I mean,
what a loaded question. I think that honestly, if I have learned anything from my humble 19 years of being on this earth, it is to go with the flow. I put myself 100% into everything that I do. I love learning. I think that's a big trait and really hobby. Wanting to learn is a hobby that Gen Z has lost for the most part. So I think that real love of learning just introduces you to so many new opportunities and people and sectors of business that, while right now I would love to go into venture capital focused in like defense infrastructure. I think that would be amazing. Defense industrials, because I really love that part of my job right now. And definitely venture. I love working with founders. But at the same time, I know that if I'm just like tunnel vision, this is all I want to do, I could, take the long way to getting where I'm supposed to be. So trying to keep my options open, but definitely VC is where we're headed right now.
Well, thank you for coming on the pod, Jessika.
Yes,
We'll have to come on soon again, and we'll watch the space and see where you land.
100%. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You are full of stories here. So tell me, you grew up in Alabama for a little bit. You were a military family. Tell me more.
First, my name is Mark Cervantes.
Hello, Mark.
Very nice to meet you.
We're flowing into this.
That's it. Let's go live.
We're flowing in.
I'm a first-generation American.
Okay, amazing.
Second-generation veteran. And a third-generation entrepreneur.
Oh.
So you just got the 1, 2, 3 of me. And
I love it.
I got so many stories, you name it. I can go for hours. So wave the flag, we can cut it short.
I know, she's going to be waving it all day.
Okay.
We're only going to get to one. It's
That's
like,
okay.
I want to have you on you're in Austin though, right?
I'm in Austin.
So we can chat more, have you on a full-length feature episode here.
I'd love it.
Yeah, the Alabama-Auburn fan base is wild. Have you been to a game?
Oh, come on. Yes, of course.
In Tuscaloosa?
Yes. I snuck in actually in Tuscaloosa. A buddy of mine snuck me in.
It's the wildest experience.
I love it.
Well, the reason I was bringing up my family in the UK is they're obviously big into soccer, but when they came to visit Alabama, my dad was a former soccer hooligan before my mom, so he's very into the rivalry, very into it, and brought my grandparents to the football game, and they just could not believe they'd never seen anything like it. And they were people who've gone to games, and my grandparents were into rugby, but they said that was the most amazing sporting experience.
What I love about the rivalry is it doesn't matter what their records are.
Yeah.
Like the coaches, that's their only mandate is beat Auburn or beat Alabama.
Yep.
Like that's probably the interview right there. And can you do that?
I know. It's very fun to see the kind of friendliness of it as well. Like there's a lot of couples who get married who are Auburn, Alabama.
Yeah, they split the outfits or license plate.
Yeah, it's quite sweet, I would say.
Given my background is I've lived everywhere from California to Washington, D.C., Florida. Alabama has a special place in my heart. And when we first heard we were going there, we're like, oh my gosh, you hear the, the background, all the stigma that comes along with it. But where we lived was really impactful for the history of the nation. Being there in Huntsville, Alabama, Warner Von Braun was there. Later on, you find out about the per capita of PhDs that were there. So that really kind of shaped me as an individual, but also the warmth of the community. I was hooked immediately. I was like, this is the place. And the next closest place for me as I retired 4 years ago was Austin. Okay. So I'm a Texan. And so I said, okay, but I never forgot Alabama or Huntsville and how it shaped me. So I said, what's going on here in Texas is very unique. And I'm happy to be here now. Really am.
I am too. And I did the same journey, Alabama, DC for a little bit, then Texas. But I did feel that it was a melting pot, especially the University of Alabama. It was very welcoming to everybody, right? And people from all over the world who'd moved there. And but Texas is my spot, right? It's the special place in my heart too. So tell me, Mark, a little bit more about what you do here. And you said you retired, but you've got a lot of stories and I can see.
Yeah, so spent 23 years in the military, the Army specifically, doing some cool stuff. And thanks towards the latter, thank you, I appreciate that. Weapon system development. So I designed and really was on that side of the military where they call it the acquisition community. My dad did that. And so I kind of grew up in that and then did that in my professional career. And so I kind of had that knowledge base, which I think helped me compound those perfect jobs.
Yes.
And I retired out of the special ops community doing some really, really cool things. And at that time, I was given a large amount of money to manage innovation in the B's, not the M's. And I did it for a very unique community that needed it today, not tomorrow. And I enjoyed it, but it gave me a global perspective. It gave me an understanding of government. I was stationed in the Pentagon for 5 years, and so that was great in itself. But to see it actually apply in a real-time environment was fascinating to me. And, careers go a different way. Your family goes a different way. I said, no, this is the time for me to leave. Here in Austin, Army Futures Command was already established. But when I was in the Pentagon, you're very successful and you get an email at 11 o'clock at night saying, show up to this office. And you walk in and you're like, wait, this is the Secretary of the Army's office. Let me check this email if that's the right number. And then the guy that comes out is the newly confirmed Secretary of the Army. He's like, are you Mark? Yes, sir, I am. Come on in here. And you get read on immediately saying, hey, we're going to set up this Army Futures Command. How can we leverage that? So I was read on very early to what was coming to a state. And my state was on the list of applicants, and it landed here. So I said, this is perfect. I'm coming back home. I'm in the sector now. I'm the CEO of Q Branch, which is a global dual use business accelerator. And we're a defense firm. And so what we look at is bringing in international businesses into a new market, which is Texas or the United States, but also introduce them into the government opportunities. The government, U.S. government is a big, huge buyer.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And sometimes it's, I don't know how to do that, or I have to word the web page and it's so complicated. And so we really help them look and explore those duplicative opportunities.
That's
and
awesome.
I'm having so much fun at this. And it requires people like you and the new platform that you just developed. Thank you for telling me that, because I have a place for that. That's so important to really bring innovation across the line. And it's a team sport.
And for government, because I feel that there's a lot of kind of missed opportunity that now is kind of with AI and a lot of expansion and new innovation is really, there's a lot of ways government can improve in efficiency or all these things, but you're in the defense space and have that experience. So I love that.
The thing I look at is, as much as innovation is happening, you have to look at the effect at an enterprise level. And so when you say government, immediately you're at the enterprise level. There is a huge divide. And so you have to manage risk. And that's part of telling not just the government about this opportunity, but the innovators about that, and understand that this is a long game. And so you really have to keep your eye on the dollar. You have to plan effectively your growth and opportunities. And sometimes, I looked at an early statistic when I was a government venture capitalist that 6% of investments pay back the other 94% of failures. And I always was drawn to that. Like, what is that? And so when I retired, I came to a venture capital ecosystem, and I found it's almost sheer execution and the management of that execution. Sometimes it's difficult. Like that room in Men in Black where that ball's flying everywhere. I've been in a room similar to that. And I always use that as an example because it doesn't matter how exquisite the technology is, you have to bring that to market.
And that's actually what my co-founder, Eric, who you just met, says all the time. He's like, ideas are cheap, execution is everything.
It really is. And the United States military executes extremely well. So a lot of those practices and methodologies that I've learned over years, this is not just Mark's instantiation of being in that, this is years of best practices, and I'm bringing it into this ecosystem. And it's really neat because these are fundamentals that are missing, but also very much fundamentals that people are willing to learn and curious to adapt.
I love it. Now, you alluded to some special projects you were working on. Are there any you can tell us about? Because I know in the military, there's a lot of top secret stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a different conversation. We have to go into a different room for that.
No.
Those are in the past. But a lot of that just came down to immediate need and solving a problem for a large-scale problem. And so what we do at Q Branch is we don't do that now. We really have that level of understanding to find that opportunity. And we can kind of translate amongst enterprise level commercial innovator, those that need that level of innovation, and even the Department of Defense or Department of Agriculture or Department of Transportation. So we look at government, whether it's federal, state, or local.
What types of companies are you working with now?
Oh my gosh. So we've run, and we haven't even hit 2 years, we've run 6 international accelerators, 3 from Japan, 1 from Singapore, 1 from Spain. We're launching our own dual use one, Western Australia. And so the range is really those in the critical infrastructure space. They've gotten some level of a MVP, but also I've had Japanese companies that are already on IPO that are looking to expand here. But each one needs fundamentals as a startup because they're entering into a new market.
For those who don't know, we have listeners across the board from, government relations folks and staff to business leaders. For those who don't know, what is an accelerator?
It's the word itself, right? I mean, if you look at 3 levels or multiple levels, it's kind of the idea all the way to delivering that idea and then the support behind it. So you have like an incubator, and then the next one is probably a venture studio, which really puts everything around them. And then you have an accelerator. An accelerator really rolls up your sleeves and starts to get to those things that you need to do beyond just the core development of your product or service. How can we shape it as a business? Something in the forefront. But we are kind of an accelerator plus. And I kind of mentioned, I think of us as a integrator in that way because these are already proven products internationally coming into a marketplace. And so we really look at what are those obstacles and try and set conditions for that to really manage time, because that's what we're all up against, the time and the technology and transitioning that into profitability or economic stimulation in a positive way.
And with the defense startups you work with and help accelerate them, they typically have a similar background to you, or what are you seeing as far as those?
I've actually seen a legislator that's now running a missile company. Yeah. I mean, that's like the correlation is not there. It's quite fascinating. So I would love to tell you, yes, there's a little bit of understanding the problem, and I'm seeing more of that. Those technologists that have seen a gap and they leverage that, and a lot of those veterans that are out, they're very much entrepreneurial, and so they want to go tackle a hard problem. They did it in the military. So it's really a range, but I have a special place in my heart for entrepreneurs wide because they demonstrate a lot of the similar qualities as a veteran. I mean, they volunteered to embark in somewhat of an unknown environment that they're not necessarily accustomed to with all the challenges that come with that.
biggest risk ever, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're a veteran in my mind too. You know, you have the same qualities. You're like, you know what? This is a problem I want to stand up and go tackle.
I did go to military school. We'll chat offline about that.
All right.
It was a bad experience for me.
Okay.
Yes. But any standout companies that you think you want to talk about or share?
There's one I'm really excited about. I cannot say the name because they're really starting to shape opportunity at the raw material level in multiple states simultaneously.
Cool.
And if we look at our near peer adversary, which is China, it's the fight, if there is a fight, the contested environment is at the raw material level. And you're seeing this support coming from the federal government in a very deliberate way for raw materials coming in. So this is a company that is launched IPO in another country, but it requires all legislators, your congressmen, your local EDCs, your universities, and that is a huge problem that we love, and we get to tackle that.
Sure. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate
that. Startups reach out to you and find you if they're wanting some of your help?
Oh, QBranch. It's as simple as a Google, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I answer my LinkedIn. I'm extremely accessible, and the way I look at it is the federal government pays me a nice retirement, and so I'm actually giving back to those taxpayers in any way I can help them.
That's awesome. We'll keep up the good work.
I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me on the podcast.
Yes.
It's a great one.
Thanks, sir.
And we'll chat more about the military school.